Okay, so this is going to be work together 4-4, and it's going to lead you through how to make correcting entries, and then you guys will do application problem 4-4. So, what are correcting entries? Basically, what we need to do is once all the posting has been completed, sometimes somewhere people are checking things, looking at totals, whatever, they figure out that there have been some mistakes made in journaling or slash posting. So that's fine. When there's an error, we have to make correcting entries. So basically, what a correcting entry does is it takes it out of where it accidentally got put into and it puts it where it needs to go. So when somebody was posting and maybe they accidentally, maybe the transaction said paid cash for rent expense, but they accidentally put it in miscellaneous expense or whatever. Or maybe it was rent expense and we have a repair expense account. So they accidentally put it into the repair one instead of the rent. Okay, so basically you just have to get it out of the of the account that it went into that was wrong and get it into the account that's correct. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple practice ones here. The source document for this is going to be a memo. Obviously somebody's going to find out that there was a mistake and they're going to make a memo of it and then give it to the bookkeeper to make this transaction, and so that we can make it correct. Okay, so if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, I'm on page 109, and I'm going to read the transaction here, and then I'm going to do it for you. All right, so these are correcting entries is what they're called. Okay, we're changing the entry. It's a correcting entry. So what does that look like, and what's the correcting entry? I will read it to you here in a second. I apologize. Okay, so it says that you discovered that a transaction for supplies bought last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to prepaid insurance instead of supplies for $60. And then our source document is memo 15. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the date, November 1. All right, so I'm going to read it again. Sometimes just it's like almost talking to yourself, like talking out here what needs to be done. All right, so it says that we discovered that a transaction for supplies bought last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to prepaid insurance instead of supplies. All right, so supplies should have been a debit and it wasn't, so we have to get it into supplies. So again, we should always list the debit first. So I know now after reading that it was supposed to go to supplies, but it didn't. So supplies needs to be debited. All right, so I'm going to go, I'm going to put the account title, I'm going to put debit, and we know that it was for $60. Okay, and the source document is a memo, and it was memo 15. Okay, but we need a credit. Okay, doesn't have anything to do with sales. It didn't say anything with sales. Didn't say anything about cash. It said that it was put into prepaid insurance in error rather than supplies. So we've got it where we want it. Now we have to get it out of prepaid insurance. So this is going to be um, a 2-line journal, just like when we buy supplies on account. Up until this point, the only time we used 2 lines for one transaction was when we bought supplies on account. Now, sometimes when we do these correcting entries, depending on what accounts are used, I would say the majority of the time they're going to be 2 lines. but there are going to be times that they potentially could be one, but for the most part, they're probably going to be two, all right? So this was our first correcting entry. We put it into supplies, we got it out of prepaid insurance. How did I know what to do? Well, I know supplies is an asset, and we increase assets with a debit, so I knew I have to increase supplies. And then prepaid insurance is also an asset, and how do you decrease an asset? Obviously with a credit. So we have a debit and a credit, all right? So that's our first correcting entry. Let's try to do one more here. Also on the first, so again, you don't need to do November. I'm going to read it. It says that we discovered that a transaction for rent expense for last month was journalized and posted in error as a debit to repair expense instead of rent expense. So that was my example, $550. Okay, so talk ourselves through it again. It got a transactions for rent expense. It was posted in error as a debit to repair expense. Okay, so it should have been rent expense initially. Well, I know that expenses are always debits. So I'm going to do rent expense because this is where it should have went and it didn't, but it needs to get in there. And so I'm going to do 550 and I'm going to do that first because I know that it increased expenses with a debit. Now, I might have mentioned this before, and I'm going to just do the memo. And you'll notice that these memos don't go in numerical order, and it's because they're just showing us these correcting entries. There's obviously going to be memos in between here. They're just kind of pulling these two out to just show us how this works. But I started to say that whenever you have a transaction that says paid cash for rent or paid cash for miscellaneous or paid cash for repair, when you use an expense, expenses are always debits. That's kind of a rule. But this is going to be the one time that we're going to go against our rule, because what happened is that we accidentally put an amount into repair expense and it shouldn't be in there. So in order to decrease repair expense, we need a credit. So this would be the one time that you would actually have a credit for an expense. It doesn't happen very often. Most of the time would be just as a correcting entry, okay? So correcting entries are entries that are being made because somebody has noticed that some posting was done inaccurately or a mistake was made or whatever, and we never just cross things out. We don't erase. We have to show all our work all the time on why this amount changed or whatever. Okay, so correcting entries, read through it. It might take 2 or 3 times. It does for me. I always have to read it once and then I go back and read it again. What accounts were affected, what was supposed to happen, and then what did happen. And you have to, kind of look and see and make sure that your debits and credits are going to equal. And we don't have to add anything up here or anything like that. All right. So 4-4 is going to be correcting entries.